Welcome back to the VybeShift Podcast. Over the course of this week, we've been walking together through one of the most personal experiences a human being can have. Not the experience of losing a career, not the experience of losing a relationship, not even the experience of losing certainty. We've been exploring something even quieter than that. The experience of feeling as though you've somehow become unfamiliar with yourself. On Monday, we simply recognized the experience. We gave language to the quiet thought that so many people carry but rarely speak aloud. I don't feel like myself anymore. On Wednesday, we became curious. Instead of asking what was wrong with us, we asked something much more compassionate. How did I become someone I never consciously chose to be? We explored how identity is quietly shaped through family, achievement, responsibility, professional success, expectation, and the stories we inherit long before we're old enough to question them. Today, I'd like to invite you into one final shift. Not a new identity, not another self-improvement project, a new way of looking. Because perhaps the greatest discovery isn't finding yourself, perhaps it's realizing where you've been looking. The search most of us never notice. Human beings are natural seekers. From the moment we're born, we're searching for safety, searching for belonging, searching for love, searching for acceptance, searching for significance. As we grow older, the search simply changes form. We search for success, we search for financial security, we search for meaningful work, we search for healthy relationships, we search for purpose. None of those searches are wrong. In many ways, they're beautiful. They move us forward. They help us grow. They allow us to contribute to the lives of others. But somewhere along the way, many of us quietly begin believing that the next achievement, the next promotion, the next relationship, the next accomplishment will finally reconnect us with ourselves. So we keep searching. We keep building. We keep striving. Not because we're greedy, not because we're never satisfied, but because we're hoping that somewhere beyond the next milestone we'll finally feel like ourselves again. The moment the search changes. There is often a moment that changes everything. It rarely happens during achievement. It usually happens during stillness, a walk through the woods, a quiet morning before anyone else wakes up, a long drive without the radio, sitting beside a lake, watching a sunset, a hospital waiting room, a retirement, a diagnosis, the loss of someone we love. Life has a curious way of creating spaces where achievement becomes temporarily silent. And in that silence, another question quietly appears. What if what I've been looking for has never been out there? That question is unsettling, because if the answer is outside of us, then the journey changes direction. For perhaps the first time in our lives, the search begins moving inward. The difference between accomplishment and alignment. One of the most important distinctions I've come to appreciate is the difference between accomplishment and alignment. Accomplishment asks, what have I achieved? Alignment asks, does the life I'm living reflect the deepest truth of who I am? Those questions can sometimes lead to the same place, but not always. It's entirely possible to build an extraordinary life while quietly drifting away from yourself. It's also possible to live a beautifully ordinary life while feeling deeply connected to who you are. The difference isn't found in circumstance, it's found in relationship. The relationship you have with yourself. Because no amount of external success can fully compensate for an internal relationship that has been neglected. And no season of external uncertainty can completely take away the peace that comes from being deeply aligned with yourself. A different kind of success. Perhaps this is why so many people reach moments that seem confusing. They've done everything they were told would create fulfillment. They've worked hard, they've sacrificed, they've become dependable, they've provided, they've succeeded, yet something still feels incomplete. Not because their life lacks value, but because success answers questions it was never designed to answer. Success can answer, can I build something meaningful? It cannot answer, who am I? Achievement can answer, what am I capable of? It cannot answer, what is most deeply true about me? Only awareness begins answering those questions. And awareness doesn't speak through louder achievement. It often speaks through quieter presence. Closing. As we pause before the second part of today's conversation, I'd like to leave you with a reflection. What if the reason you've been feeling disconnected from yourself isn't because you've been moving in the wrong direction, but because you've been looking for yourself in places where you were never meant to be found? Not in your title, not in your productivity, not in your achievements, not even in the opinions of other people. What if the person you've been searching for has been patiently waiting beneath all of those things, waiting for the moment awareness finally turned inward? That's where we'll continue on part 2. Because once the search changes direction, everything else begins to change with it. Part 2, the person who never left. Welcome back. As we close the first part of today's conversation, we arrived at a possibility that quietly challenges the way many of us have lived. What if the reason we don't feel like ourselves anymore isn't because we've lost ourselves, but because we've been looking in places where the deepest part of us could never be found? That's a radical shift. Because if it's true, then perhaps the journey isn't about becoming someone new. Perhaps it's about remembering someone we've stopped listening to. The quiet presence beneath it all. I want to invite you to consider something. Think back over the different seasons of your life. You were once a child, then perhaps a student, an employee, a spouse, a parent, a business owner, a caregiver, a leader, a retiree. Or maybe you're standing at the threshold of becoming one of those things. Your roles have changed, your body has changed, your beliefs have evolved, your circumstances have risen and fallen, your successes have come, your disappointments have come. Entire chapters of your life have opened and eventually closed. And yet, through every one of those seasons, there has been something remarkably consistent. There has always been a quiet awareness experiencing it all. The roles changed, the awareness remained. The circumstances changed, the awareness remained. The stories changed, the awareness remained. Perhaps that's why something inside of you has always known when you were living in alignment and when you were not. Because beneath every identity you've ever worn, there has always been a deeper presence quietly witnessing your life. The difference between identity and essence. This may be one of the most important distinctions we've explored all week. Identity answers the question, who have I become? Essence quietly asks, who has been here all along? Identity grows, it changes, it adapts, it learns, it expands. Essence simply is. Identity needs descriptions. Essence doesn't. Identity says, I am a leader. I am successful. I am retired. I am a parent. I am productive. Those descriptions may all be true, but they are descriptions of your experience. They are not the deepest truth of your being. Perhaps this is why every major life transition feels so disorienting. When our identity changes, we assume we've changed completely. But maybe what has changed is only the role, not the one who has been living it. Coming home isn't going back. One of the traps we can fall into when we don't feel like ourselves anymore is believing that we need to become who we used to be. We look backward. We remember an early version of ourselves, a younger version, a freer version, a version with fewer responsibilities, and we quietly tell ourselves, I just want to feel like that again. But awareness offers a different invitation. It doesn't ask us to go backward, because life isn't asking us to become who we were. It's inviting us to become more fully present as who we are now. Coming home to yourself doesn't mean returning to an earlier chapter. It means becoming deeply acquainted with yourself in this chapter, with all the wisdom you've gained, all of the scars you've earned, all of the compassion you've developed, all the resilience you discovered. You are not trying to rediscover an old identity. You're learning to inhabit your present life more consciously. The gentle practice of listening. Most of us have spent decades learning how to listen to the world. We know how to hear expectations, deadlines, opinions, demands, responsibilities, notifications, schedules. The voices around us are loud. The deeper voice within us is really loud. It doesn't compete. It does not shout. It does not demand. It simply waits patiently until we become quiet enough to hear it. Perhaps that's why so many meaningful moments happen in silence. On a walk, during meditation, while watching rain fall against a window, floating in a swimming pool, sitting beside a lake. Those moments don't create the deeper self. They simply remove enough noise for us to notice what has always been present. Maybe that's why those moments feel so nourishing. Not because we're escaping life, but because we're reconnecting with the one who has been living it. You don't have to earn yourself. This may be the most liberating realization of all. You don't have to earn your own authenticity. You don't have to become worthy of being yourself. You don't have to achieve enough, heal enough, learn enough, or accomplish enough before you're allowed to come home to yourself. The deeper part of you has never been waiting for perfection. It has simply been waiting for your attention. What a remarkable thought. After spending so much of our lives trying to become enough, perhaps awareness quietly whispers, you have always been enough to begin paying attention. Not because you've done anything right, but because your worth was never dependent upon your performance in the first place. Closing. As we prepare for the final part of this week's journey together, I'd like to leave you with a single reflection. If the deepest part of who you are has never actually disappeared, what would change if you stopped trying to find yourself and simply began spending time with yourself? Not fixing, not improving, not evaluating, simply becoming familiar again. Because perhaps this is where coming home begins. Not with dramatic reinvention, but with a quiet reunion. In the final part of this week's conversation, we'll explore what it looks like to begin living from the deeper place, not as another goal to achieve, but as a way of moving through life with greater presence, congruence, and inner freedom. Part 3. Living from the person you've always been. Welcome back. As we've journeyed together this week, I hope you've begun to notice something. This conversation was never really about finding yourself. It was about changing your relationship with yourself. On Monday, we recognized a feeling that many people quietly carry. I don't feel like myself anymore. On Wednesday, we explored how that experience often develops over the course of a lifetime. Not through one dramatic event, but through thousands of ordinary moments that slowly shape the identity we present to the world. And today, we've considered a different possibility. Perhaps the deepest part of who you are has never actually disappeared. Perhaps awareness is simply inviting you to notice what has always been present beneath the roles, the expectations, the achievements, and the responsibilities. If that's true, then perhaps the question isn't who am I? Perhaps the question is, how do I begin living from the person I've always been all along? Congruence. Congruence is what happens when the life we are living begins reflecting the deepest truth of who we are. It doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. It doesn't mean uncertainty disappears. It doesn't mean responsibilities go away. It simply means there is less distance between your inner experience and your outer life. When we're incongruent, we often feel like we're performing. We become exhausted trying to maintain an identity. We say yes when our hearts are saying no. We measure ourselves by standards we never consciously chose. We quietly wonder why success doesn't feel as fulfilling as we imagined. But when congruence begins emerging, something beautifully ordinary happens. Life starts feeling like it fits. Not because everything has changed, but because we are no longer living at war with ourselves. Presence changes everything. One of the greatest gifts of awareness offers us isn't certainty, it's presence. For years we may have lived asking, what's next? Awareness gently replaces that question with another. What's here? That one small shift changes everything, because life is no longer something we're trying to outrun. It's something we're finally experiencing. We begin noticing conversations instead of rehearsing responses. We notice sunsets instead of simply driving past them. We notice laughter, silence, breath, gratitude. Even ordinary moments begin feeling more alive, not because the world has changed, but because we've returned to it. Perhaps that's what we've been really missing. Not ourselves, presence. A different definition of success. As we close this week's conversation, I'd like to offer one final thought. Many of us have spent years defining success by what we've accumulated: accomplishments, recognition, influence, security. There is nothing inherently wrong with those things, but perhaps awareness invites another measure. What if success also includes feeling at home within your own life? What if success includes waking up without feeling like you're performing your existence? What if success includes trusting your own experience instead of constantly measuring yourself against someone else's expectations? What if success is not simply about building a meaningful life, but about actually being present enough to live it? That feels like a different kind of success, one that no one else can define for you. A quiet return. Throughout this week, we've spoken about identity, but perhaps identity isn't something you manufacture. Perhaps it's something we uncover, layer by layer, expectation by expectation, story by story, until eventually what remains is beautifully simple. Not the person trying to become enough, the person who quietly discovers they never needed to become someone else in order to be worthy of their own presence. That realization doesn't happen all at once. It's a practice, a relationship, a lifelong conversation with yourself. And perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Because the deepest relationships in our lives are never finished. They continue unfolding, day by day, moment by moment, awareness by awareness. This week's invitation. As you move into the days ahead, I'd like to leave you with a very simple invitation. Several times each day, pause. Take one conscious breath, then quietly ask yourself, am I living from expectation or from awareness? You don't need to change anything in that moment. Simply notice, because awareness grows wherever attention is lovingly placed, and perhaps you'll begin discovering something remarkable. The more present you become, the less often you find yourself asking, where did I go? Because you'll already be there. Closing. If this week's conversation has resonated with you, I hope you'll continue the journey. In this week's Stage podcast, we'll step even deeper from the architecture of identity and explore one of the most transformative questions we've ever asked. Who was I before I learned who I was supposed to become? Together we'll explore how inherited identities are formed, why awareness often feels like an identity crisis before it feels like freedom, and how congruence emerges when we begin living from our deepest truth rather than the most practiced roles. You can listen to the Stage podcast by following the link in the show notes. You'll also find this week's VybeShift blog, where we'll bring together the themes from both podcasts into one practical reflection you can carry into your everyday life. And if you're just beginning your VybeShift journey, I invite you to explore our growing Core Problems library, where each conversation gives language to experiences that so many people silently carry. If you've ever been pulled into too many directions, VSP number 4, I Feel Pulled in Every Direction, is an excellent place to begin. It offers a guided process for moving from overwhelm toward clarity, presence, and internal living. Begin VSP by following the link here in the show notes. Until next time, remember this. You are more than your title. You are more than your responsibilities. You are more than your accomplishments. You are more than the roles you faithfully played. Those things are chapters of your life. They are not the author of your life. And perhaps the reason you don't feel like yourself anymore is because awareness has been gently inviting you towards something even more beautiful. Not a new identity, not a better version of yourself, but a life of congruence, where the person the world experiences is finally becoming the same person you experience when you quietly are alone. And there is a profound peace in that. Because when your outer life begins reflecting your inner truth, you no longer have to search for yourself. You simply get to be yourself.